Cardinal Tagle's shocking announcement. The truth finally revealed. Striking revelation that shook the Vatican. Has the Vatican's rising star finally confronted his greatest challenge? Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle recently captured global attention with a shocking announcement he made after a heartbreaking discovery that tested his resolve and leadership. As controversies mounted around his stance on critical issues, his revelation left many questioning what this means for his legacy and the future of the Catholic Church. What prompted this beloved cardinal, once considered Pope Francis's potential successor, to break his silence? Was it the pressure of criticism or something more profound that the world has yet to understand? Join us as we unravel the details of this announcement that could reshape the Church's direction in these turbulent times. The foundations of a visionary leader. Born on June 21, 1957, Luis Antonio Tagle entered the world as the firstborn, deeply religious Catholic family that would shape his spiritual journey. His father, Manuel Tapacio Tagle, was of Tagalog descent, while his mother, Milagro Esco Kim, had Chinese-Filipino roots, giving the future cardinal a rich cultural heritage that would later influence his global perspective. Before dedicating herself to family life, Milagro worked at Equitable PCI Bank, instilling in young Luis the values of dedication and service. The Tagle family history reveals a legacy of resilience and faith. His paternal ancestry traced back to Imus, Cavite, where his grandfather Florencio belonged to the Spanish Christian Principal a social elite that preceded the 1896 Philippine Revolution. However, fate took a challenging turn during World War II when Florencio suffered injuries in a bomb explosion. This adversity forced Tagle's grandmother to become the family's provider by operating a local dynasty, perhaps planting the early seeds of compassion for struggling families that would later define Cardinal Tagle's ministry. How did these early experiences shape the man who would become one of the Church's most influential voices? The answer began to emerge during his formative years at St. Andrew's School in Para-AQ, where he completed both elementary and high school by 1973. It was here, through meaningful friendships with priests, that young Luis first felt the divine calling to religious life. This calling led him to the Jesuit-run San Jose Seminary, which facilitated his studies at the prestigious Ateneo de Manila University, demonstrating exceptional intellectual capacity. He earned a Bachelor of Arts in Pre-Divinity in 1973, followed by a Master of Arts in Theology at the Loyola School of Theology. But Tagle's pursuit of knowledge didn't stop there. From 1987 to 1991, he worked towards a doctorate in sacred theology at the Catholic University of America, studying under the renowned Joseph A. Comonsihac. His dissertation, which examined episcopal collegiality in the teaching and practice of Paul VI, revealed his deep interest in church governance and unity, themes that would later define his leadership approach. Comonsihac, impressed by Tagle's brilliance, would later remark that he was among the finest students he had encountered in over 4 decades, suggesting that Tagle might have emerged as Asia's foremost theologian had he not chosen the path of the bishopric. The breadth of Tagle's intellectual pursuits extended beyond his doctoral studies. He attended courses at the Institute of Pope Paul VI University and received honorary degrees from both Catholic Theological Union and La Salle University. Perhaps most impressively, beyond his native Tagalog and English, Tagle mastered Italian and developed the ability to read Spanish, French, Korean, and Latin, linguistic skills that would later facilitate his work across cultural boundaries. Following his ordination in the Diocese of Imus on February 27, 1982, Tagle embarked on his pastoral journey with characteristic humility and dedication. His early roles included serving as an associate pastor at San Agustin Parish in Ndeznes, Cavite, spiritual director, and eventually rector at the Diocesan Seminary of Imus. After furthering his studies in the United States, he returned to serve as the Episcopal Vicar for Religious and as parish priest at Nuestra Señora del Pilar Cathedral Parish. His intellectual gifts found expression in academia as well, as he taught theology at both San Carlos Seminary and Divine Word Seminary in Tague, in a significant acknowledgement of his theological acumen. Pope John Paul II appointed him to the International Theological Commission in 1997, where he collaborated with Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, who would later become Pope Benedict XVI. From 1995 to 2001. Tagle also contributed to the editorial board for the History of Vatican II project, cementing his reputation as a scholar of the Church's evolving identity. But what transformed this brilliant theologian into a leader whose words could move millions? And why, despite his impressive credentials, have his leadership skills faced growing scrutiny? Could there be deeper controversies beneath his charismatic presence that the public has yet to fully understand? A leader of compassion and action, Cardinal Tagle's influence extended far beyond administrative competence and theological expertise. Known for his rare combination of emotional intelligence and intellectual depth, he embodied the compassionate leadership principles championed by Pope Francis. His focus remained unwavering, uplifting the marginalized and impoverished through practical solutions rather than mere rhetoric. One of his most impactful initiatives unfolded in sub-Saharan Africa, where many Catholic communities struggled with devastating economic challenges. Instead of offering empty platitudes, Tagle demonstrated action-oriented leadership by implementing tangible measures. Under his guidance, the Vatican forged partnerships with local communities to establish funding for schools and vocational training programs, creating sustainable pathways to improved livelihoods. But what truly set Tagle apart was his holistic approach. His mission extended beyond alleviating material poverty to reinforcing spiritual foundations. These multifaceted efforts highlighted the Church's commitment to addressing both spiritual and material needs, a balance that many religious leaders struggle to achieve. In conflict-torn Myanmar, Tagle emerged as an instrument of reconciliation amid political and ethnic turmoil. He recognized that genuine peace required more than political agreements. It demanded bridging diverse faith traditions and fostering dialogue at the grassroots level. By bringing together Catholic and Buddhist leaders, he established unprecedented forums for understanding and unity, offering hope to communities ravaged by division. Could this approach to interfaith dialogue be the model needed in our increasingly polarized world? Many observers believe Tagle's method represents a vital path forward for religious institutions seeking relevance in pluralistic societies. His distinctive approach to enculturation further distinguished his leadership philosophy. Tagle advocated passionately for incorporating indigenous music, art, and language into Catholic liturgical practices. For him, the Church wasn't simply an external presence within cultures, but an integral component that should reflect local expressions of faith. This vision empowered communities to express their spirituality in authentic and meaningful ways, strengthening their connection to the universal Church while honoring their unique heritage. As president of Caritas Internationalis, Tagle spearheaded the Share the Journey campaign, raising global awareness about the plight of migrants and refugees. His advocacy transcended typical institutional responses. He personally visited refugee camps in Lebanon and Jordan, sitting with displaced individuals and listening to their heart-rending stories with genuine empathy. Using his platform to amplify their voices, he consistently reminded the world of our shared humanity and responsibility toward those forced to flee their homes. Tagle's leadership extended to pressing global challenges including climate change, systemic poverty, and forced migration. Rather than limiting himself to ecclesiastical concerns, he fostered innovative collaborations between the Vatican and secular organizations, prioritizing concrete action over ceremonial gestures. His vision encompassed a church actively pursuing justice, standing in solidarity with the global community to address systemic challenges that transcend religious boundaries. In 2019, Pope Francis appointed Tagle to lead the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, positioning him at the forefront of the Church's missionary endeavors. This significant role gave him oversight of the dissemination of Catholic teachings, particularly in regions experiencing substantial church growth. His partnership with Pope Francis, grounded in mutual trust and shared principles, prompted many Vatican observers to view Tagle as a potential successor to the papacy. Tagle's leadership style mirrored Francis's hallmark humility and warmth, allowing him to connect authentically with ordinary people across cultural divides, whether addressing complex theological questions or sharing meals with refugees. He embodied the accessible spirit that had won the hearts of millions worldwide. His meteoric rise within church leadership was no accident. It stemmed from a profound commitment to the values of compassion, inclusion, and willingness to confront uncomfortable global realities. Yet the path ahead for Cardinal Tagle was fraught with unexpected challenges. Beneath the accolades and admiration lay intricate problems that would test his capacity to guide the Church through some of its most turbulent times. What forces have aligned against this beloved cardinal? Could there be more to his story than meets the eye? Or is the opposition related to his potential to succeed Pope Francis? The answers may surprise you. Challenges and controversies on the path to the papacy. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle has long been considered a frontrunner in discussions about potential successors to Pope Francis. His compassionate leadership style and international appeal have garnered widespread admiration. Yet Vatican insiders increasingly suggest that his path to the papacy is far from guaranteed. While his close association with Pope Francis has earned him considerable influence, this connection brings its own set of challenges. Respected Vatican analysts believe Tagle must establish himself as more than just an Asian Francis and develop a distinctive identity that resonates with the diverse College of Cardinals. Experts have identified three critical factors potentially hindering his candidacy. First among these is the formidable competition he faces from other papal contenders, most notably Singaporean Cardinal William Goh. Like Tagle, Goh represents Asia and speaks fluent English, aligning with the Church's growing emphasis on regions beyond Europe. However, Goh is widely perceived as someone who can effectively bridge the Church's conservative and progressive factions. See a diplomatic skill that Tagle, known primarily for his progressive stances, has sometimes struggled to demonstrate. Could this versatility give Goh a decisive edge in a future conclave? The second challenge stems from Tagle's progressive image. See simultaneously his greatest strength and potential liability. Throughout his career, he has advocated passionately for a more welcoming church, has challenged divisive rhetoric, and has pushed for greater inclusivity, particularly regarding LGBTQ Catholics. At a landmark Lambeth conference, he warned against ethnic and cultural conflicts that could undermine the Church's mission and criticized populist movements that he believed distorted the essence of Christian unity. While these positions resonate deeply with progressive Catholics, they may alienate more traditional members of the Church hierarchy who hold significant influence in papal elections. The third and perhaps most politically sensitive challenge involves Tagle's perceived reluctance to adopt a firmer stance on issues concerning China. The Vatican's relationship with Beijing represents one of the most complex diplomatic challenges facing the Church today, and some critics have noted Tagle's relative silence on this matter. Insiders suggest that other candidates might appear more willing to directly confront these geopolitical challenges, potentially giving them an advantage when cardinals evaluate leadership qualities. Adding complexity to these specific challenges is Tagle's stylistic resemblance to Pope Francis, which has generated both admiration and concern. Astute observers have noted that Tagle's rhetoric often echoes Francis's language, particularly regarding migration and populism. For instance, during Francis's return journey from Kazakhstan, He framed migration as an opportunity to enrich the cultural and intellectual landscape of Western nations. Similarly, Tagle has cautioned against attitudes that could fracture the Church's spiritual unity, emphasizing hospitality and inclusiveness as core Christian values. While these shared values strengthen Tagle's appeal among progressives, they also inextricably link him to Francis's legacy, a connection that certain factions within the Church might view as problematic. These groups appear to prefer a leader who demonstrates greater independence and offers fresh perspectives, rather than continuing the current papal trajectory. Critics have also pointed to Tagle's tenure as Archbishop of Manila as a complicating factor in his papal prospects. The influential Manila Standard accused him of entangling the Church in partisan politics through his outspoken criticism of former President Rodrigo Duterte's controversial policies. Reports suggested that critics believed Tagle had overstepped ecclesiastical boundaries by permitting politically charged homilies that appeared to undermine Duterte's administration. Such actions, they argued, violated the constitutional separation of church and state and raised concerns about Tagle's ability to maintain appropriate political neutrality, a quality many consider essential for papal leadership. Questions have also emerged regarding Tagle's handling of clerical misconduct during his Manila leadership. Critics alleged that he failed to hold certain clerics sufficiently accountable for their actions, raising doubts about his capacity to enforce necessary discipline within the Church. This perceived lack of firmness prompted some observers to question whether he possessed the resolve and authority needed to guide the global Church effectively through its ongoing challenges. What remains puzzling to many Vatican watchers is why Tagle remained silent about these mounting criticisms for so long. What finally compelled him to speak out after enduring these challenges? The answer may lie in a profound personal revelation that would change everything. The silent struggle of Cardinal Tagle. While Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle has long been viewed as a leading contender in papal succession discussions, his journey toward potential church leadership has been shadowed by significant obstacles. Despite his charismatic presence, extensive theological background, and international appeal, skeptics have increasingly questioned whether he can truly emerge from Pope Francis's shadow to establish his own distinctive leadership identity. These doubts intensified as analysts scrutinized his positions on pivotal issues, particularly his approach to China, his progressive theological outlook, and his capacity to unify an increasingly fractured Church. Tagle's relative silence regarding China has generated substantial controversy within global Church circles. The controversial agreement negotiated between Pope Francis and the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, ostensibly designed to improve Vatican-Beijing relations, has faced fierce criticism from those who believe it compromises core Church principles. Tagle, who shares Francis's cautious diplomatic approach, has largely refrained from openly criticizing the Chinese government's religious policies. Critics argue that this reluctance potentially links him to what some perceive as the Vatican's excessive accommodation toward the CCP. This silence becomes particularly notable given Tagle's influential positions within Vatican leadership, serving as prefect for the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples from 2019 to 2022, and subsequently as pro-prefect of its successor, the Dicaster Y for Evangelization. Tagle has wielded considerable influence over the Church's global missionary efforts, despite being intimately connected to discussions surrounding the Vatican-China agreement. He has rarely addressed the documented challenges facing Chinese Christians. Has this diplomatic caution been strategic wisdom or a concerning abdication of moral leadership? Adding another layer of complexity is Tagle's personal background. As a Filipino with partial Chinese ancestry, he comes from a nation entangled in territorial disputes with China over areas like the South China Sea. This connection raises additional questions for some observers about whether he would engage with politically sensitive geopolitical issues if elevated to the papacy. His hesitancy to stake out a clear position on the Vatican-China agreement has led some to question his Dines to navigate other complex international challenges that might arise during a potential pontificate. This perceived reluctance became particularly evident during the trial of Cardinal Joseph Zen, a prominent critic of the Vatican's arrangement with China. Though the trial encountered delays, Zen's predicament highlighted the ongoing tensions between church leaders and Beijing's policies. Pope Francis had maintained a diplomatic stance toward China, even attempting to arrange a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping during his Kazakhstan visit. An overture ultimately declined by the Chinese leader, Tagle, who has supported Francis's dialogue-focused approach, refrained from commenting substantively on these developments, leading critics to view him as complicit in a policy they believe undermines the Church's moral authority. Tagle's close alignment with Pope Francis has brought both advantages and liabilities. His rhetoric frequently mirrors Francis's language, particularly regarding migration, inclusivity, and interreligious dialogue. While these shared values enhance his appeal among progressive Catholic circles, they also firmly associate him with the current Pope's legacy, a connection that could alienate more conservative elements within the Church who desire a change in direction. Critics contend that the Church needs a leader capable of demonstrating greater independence and offering fresh perspectives on entrenched challenges, further complicating Tagle's standing or criticisms of his domestic leadership in the Philippines. During his tenure as Archbishop of Manila, he faced accusations of excessively politicizing the Church through his opposition to former President Rodrigo Duterte's administration. Detractors claimed that Tagle permitted homilies containing divisive political messaging, which some argued violated the constitutional separation of church and state. Others questioned whether this political engagement distracted from his spiritual leadership responsibilities at a time when the Church faced numerous internal challenges. Tagle's handling of clerical misconduct cases during his Manila leadership also attracted significant criticism. Some alleged that he failed to impose adequate accountability measures for certain clergy members, raising concerns about his willingness to enforce necessary discipline within church structures. This perceived leniency led some observers to question his capacity to provide the decisive leadership needed for the Church's most sensitive issues, particularly in light of the expectations surrounding papal authority. Despite these controversies, Tagle continued to play an influential role in shaping church direction. His perspectives on the Second Vatican Council earned widespread respect, though not without generating debate. As a contributor to the landmark History of Vatican II project, Tagle authored a chapter examining Pope Paul VI's actions during this pivotal church council. While his analysis received scholarly praise for its insight, some critics suggested it lacked sufficient objectivity. Nevertheless, his defense of Pope Paul VI's inclusive approach, which accommodated diverse theological perspectives, demonstrated his sophisticated understanding of the complex dynamics inherent in church leadership. Tagle's challenges extended beyond domestic and academic spheres into the competitive landscape of the College of Cardinals. He faced formidable rivals like Singaporean Cardinal William Goh, who demonstrated particular skill in connecting with conservative church constituencies. Goh's ability to bridge ideological divides offered him a strategic advantage in the complex interpersonal dynamics that ultimately determined papal succession. Despite these formidable obstacles, Tagle's supporters maintained that his progressive vision and global perspective represented precisely the leadership the Church needs for navigating contemporary challenges. They argued that his emphasis on inclusivity and dialogue could guide the Church through worldwide crises of faith and relevance, while critics insisted he must address his perceived weaknesses to strengthen his papal prospects. What profound discovery finally pushed Tagle to break his silence? And how did this revelation lead to an announcement that could reshape his legacy and the Church's future direction? The huge announcement that changed everything. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, a pivotal figure in the global Catholic community, recently stunned church observers with a momentous announcement following a deeply personal revelation. This insight which intertwined his innermost convictions with his vision for the Church's future, has ignited widespread discussion throughout religious circles worldwide. During a special assembly convened at the Vatican, Tagle addressed the urgent challenges confronting marginalized communities and outlined the Church's moral responsibility in addressing these critical issues. The Cardinal's announcement emerged after what he described as a heart-wrenching awareness of the escalating persecution facing Christian communities around the world. Drawing on his extensive experience leading the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples and later the Dicaster Y for Evangelization, Tagle recounted encountering countless testimonies of Christians suffering under oppressive conditions, particularly in regions where religious freedoms face severe constraints. This growing recognition, he explained, compelled him to adopt a more proactive stance on these pressing matters that could no longer be addressed through silent diplomacy alone. In his landmark address, Tagle unveiled an ambitious new initiative designed to strengthen support mechanisms for persecuted Christians worldwide. He presented a comprehensive strategy aimed at providing both material assistance and spiritual accompaniment while simultaneously advocating for stronger diplomatic measures to protect religious freedoms. This program, which he named Faith in Solidarity, represents a defining moment in his leadership trajectory, highlighting the Church's obligation to take decisive action in times of crisis rather than remaining passive in the face of suffering. Tagle explained that this initiative emerged from profound personal reflection combined with his first-hand observations in conflict zones. He vividly described visiting a war-ravaged area in the Middle East, where he encountered families who had sacrificed everything for their faith. Their unwavering courage and spiritual resilience amid persecution deeply moved him. Their suffering, Tagle emphasized with visible emotion, is not merely a tragedy to be lamented, but a clarion call for action, underscoring the Church's moral imperative to respond with both urgency and compassion. What surprised many Vatican observers was the announcement's marked shift in Tagle's approach to some of the Church's most divisive issues. For the first time, he directly addressed criticisms regarding his perceived reticence on politically sensitive matters, particularly concerning the Vatican's complex relationship with China, while carefully avoiding specific mention of the controversial Vatican-China agreement. He acknowledged the challenges inherent in pursuing dialogue with nations that restrict religious freedoms. Tagle emphasized that his new initiative would prioritize transparency and accountability, reaffirming the Church's fundamental commitment to protecting its most vulnerable members, regardless of political sensitivities. Analysts noted that this announcement signaled a significant departure from Tagle's previously cautious diplomatic tone. Many interpreted it as a deliberate effort to establish a more distinctive leadership identity, separate from Pope Francis, with whom he has frequently been compared. By confronting the criticisms directed at him, see particularly his reluctance to engage with politically contentious issues, Tagle demonstrated a newfound willingness to address challenges directly, a quality many consider essential for anyone with papal aspirations. The timing of this announcement carried particular significance, coinciding with the ongoing trial of Cardinal Tagle'S, a prominent critic of the Vatican's approach to China. Though Tagle refrained from explicitly commenting on the trial itself, his emphasis on solidarity with persecuted Christians was widely interpreted as an implicit acknowledgement of the Church's duty to support those who risk their freedom and safety for their religious convictions. Some skeptics have questioned whether Tagle's initiative will produce meaningful change or merely serve as a strategic diversion from previous controversies. These critics doubt his ability to effectively navigate the complex geopolitical dynamics surrounding the protection of persecuted Christians, particularly in regions like China where the Church's relationship with governmental authorities remains deeply strained. Will this new direction represent genuine evolution in his leadership approach or simply a calculated political maneuver? Conversely, Tagle's supporters have enthusiastically embraced the initiative as a substantive step forward. They point to his long-standing commitment to inclusivity, compassion, and proactive engagement as evidence of his authentic dedication to marginalized communities worldwide. In his concluding remarks, Tagle called for unified global action, urging Catholics everywhere to support the Faith in Solidarity initiative and emphasizing the necessity of collective effort in alleviating the suffering of persecuted believers. As the Church continues to navigate these turbulent times, Cardinal Tagle's announcement may represent a pivotal moment not only in his personal journey but in the broader evolution of Catholic leadership in an increasingly complex global landscape. Has this revelation finally resolved the doubts surrounding his leadership? Or does it mark the beginning of an even more challenging chapter in his remarkable journey? Only time will reveal the full impact of this momentous declaration. If you found this insight into Cardinal Tagle's journey enlightening, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth coverage of faith leaders making a difference in today's world. Click the notification bell to stay updated on our latest videos, and share your thoughts in the comments below.